All right, so you should be seeing my screen. All right, so are you guys seeing that first slide? Okay, great. All right, so this is just a quick conversation about the census and why it's important and what it means to you as a student and how that's important moving forward. So my name's Natalie. I'm the director of Illinois Campus Compact. So I will talk a little bit about what Campus Compact is in a second, but as I said, we're going to start with introductions. I'm going to skip the activity just because it was just something to get people's brains moving, but I know we only have a couple folks on, so we'll go straight into some of the information. Then I'll talk about the census in general, and then we can go into some questions. So the idea behind this was that, there's a lot of questions that come up around the census for all students, but particularly for international students. And so how can we address some of those issues and really just answer any questions that you might have, specifically now that we are in a COVID-19 environment where we're not actually on campus and may not have access to the folks that we normally talk to about these types of things. So Campus Compact is a national organization. We work with colleges and universities all over the country, basically helping them with anything that makes a campus or a student a better citizen. What that means is we do service learning, we do voter registration and education. We believe that colleges are a great opportunity for students to learn about what it is to be engaged in their community, and we help to create those opportunities. And then, Allison, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about what PIRG is and how.
Yeah, okay, so PIRG is like a public interest research group. So I'm interning with them right now. So like that's why I'm here. And so I'm just like been working on campus prior to all this, like doing like stuff for the census, but they do some like different things like each semester. Like this next semester in the fall, it's going to be more about like voter registration for like the general election. So just stuff that is like pertinent to like colleges and everything.
Great. And you'll see this little hashtag Illinois Count Me In 2020. It's because Campus Compact and PIRG and another organization called Change Illinois got together to do these types of presentations for universities, and we're doing them together. That's how Allison and I got connected. So Count Me In Illinois, or IL Count Me In 2020, is out of an organization called Forefront, which is the Illinois Association for Nonprofits and Funders. So they've been doing a lot of work to really get the message out about the census, and they've asked us to do a lot of work on campuses. I'm going to skip the activity. So what are sort of the basics of what the census is? So the U.S. Constitution mandates that every 10 years, the United States engages in a count of every single person in the country. So that's citizen, non-citizen, documented, undocumented, it doesn't matter. Anybody who is here in the country should be counted. What's important to remember, particularly in this sort of COVID-19 time period, is that what the census is trying to do is get a snapshot of who lives in this country and where they are. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we have sort of been scattered from where we normally would be at this point. So we're trying to count where people are on April 1st of 2020. And if this had been a normal year, you all would still be on campus doing your thing and you'd be counted there. But it's not a normal year, and you've been spread out to wherever it is that you have gone at this time period. And so we still need to get that snapshot, though. The idea is that this census data is used to determine how more than $675 billion in federal funds are distributed to states. And so if, in 2021, when things are back to normal and there's students all over Southern Illinois, Edwardsville's campus, then if we haven't done a good count in 2020, we might not have the resources we need to continue the work that we do in the community. So just something to remember about why this is such a unique time period is that, you know, they just choose April 1st as a random date. It's not, there's nothing significant about that. The idea is really about getting this snapshot of who's where, what they're doing, why they're there, so that we can really distribute the federal resources in ways that they are helpful. And in addition, then states use those resources to figure out where all of our House representative districts are. And they use those resources to determine who needs water service and electric service. And they use those resources in lots of different ways. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So as I said, representation in Congress is dependent on the census. So one of the things that is really important to Illinois and that we need to remember is that Illinois has lost a seat in the House of Representatives every census since 1950. So in the 50s, we had 26 representatives in the House, and now we have 18. We are most likely losing one, if not two, seats in the House because we've had such a population decline. And it's not just based on our population decline, it's also based on how population has grown in other states. So there is a finite number of House seats, and they distribute those based on where the population is. And so if Illinois has shrunk and some other states have gotten larger, then they get our House seats and we lose them. This is important for a few reasons, but if you think about, you know, all of the things that Southern Illinois University Edwardsville interacts with federal government on, then you think about what that representation means, right? So your House representative is helping to secure federal funding for Pell Grants and direct loans, and is helping to secure funding for the hospitals in your area and for the Head Start programs and the free lunch programs. So making sure that there's a good representation of who those folks are in that area is really important. Other things that get funded are highway and transportation, Medicaid. So, you know, that's a big thing right now is thinking about healthcare. If we don't know how many people are in your area, then we might not have enough resources to have the correct amount of healthcare. And that's, I mean, obviously we're learning that's going to be huge. So, you know, it also affects, because our electoral votes in, you know, voting for president are connected to how many representatives we have, that's also connected in some ways as well. So lots of things are affected by the census numbers. So what's at risk? Illinois risks losing $20 billion in federal funding for the state, and that's over the 10 years. Because, you know, we do this every 10 years and then it's done. So if we have a mistake in 2020, we can't fix it until 2030. So an undercount in Illinois would represent 120,000 people, and that could cost the state $1.2 billion over the next decade. There's different, so the way they decide what an undercount is, so like they know that there's people living in different places based on driver's license records, based on school enrollment records, based on different things. So they compare that data to the census and how folks have been counted, and that's how they figure out what the undercount is. There are parts of our state that have been undercounted by 50%, which means that 50% of the people that live there are not represented in the census data. That means we don't know how old they are, so we don't know if they're going to need resources in schooling. We don't know if they're going to need hospital care or nursing home care in the future. Like, having those details is really important in order for us to allocate our resources well. One thing that a lot of folks are still talking about is the citizenship question. So that was a big thing in the fall, was that there was a possibility that they were going to put a question about citizenship on the census. That is not happening. That question was not included. And in the next slide, or somewhere in there, I'll show you what the form looks like. But the idea is that whether or not you are a citizen of this country, if you are here and you are participating in the community, you need to be counted. So having this citizenship question felt like it might deter some folks from responding. And so folks, particularly a lot of nonprofits that represent different race and ethnicity groups, different historically vulnerable populations, really lobbied to have that not included, and it wasn't included. So definitely a good opportunity. So here's what the form looks like. And I have the website to go to, and if we want to, we can actually go take a look at that. But it's a pretty simple form. And it looks a little different if you fill it out online, but the questions are all the same. So they want to know how many people live in your residence. And I should say, census forms and census letters are being sent to your home. They aren't being addressed to a specific person. So when I got my census letter, it said to the residents of, California Avenue, Chicago, Illinois, because this is about each home, not about individual people, right? So they are counting people based on where they live. So if you live in a home with multiple roommates, you're going to get one form, and you should realistically fill out one census. But especially in this time where we know that lots of folks have been scattered and you may not be, sitting next to your roommate on a regular basis, always err on the side of over responding. So even if you aren't positive that your roommate has responded or not, you should still respond. The census has ways of combining data, culling out data that doesn't need to be there. And so they're really telling people, err on the side of over counting because you don't want to not be counted. So they ask you how many people are there. They ask you to make sure that you're not forgetting anyone. So there's a lot of folks that do get forgotten in the census, particularly children. So children 0 to 5 tend to be left off, which is really detrimental because they're the ones that need schools. They're the ones that need, pre-K. Like there's a lot of stuff that gets funded through the census that depends on that count. But for some reason, sometimes people look at their newborn and like, oh, you don't need to be on there. But they do. Sometimes people think, oh, well, someone's just staying with me temporarily, so they don't get counted. But if they aren't going to be counted elsewhere, they should be counted with you. So like if your grandparents live with you and it's, they're only living with you for 6 months, they should still be counted because they're here and they're living with you for the majority of the time. Again, the census has ways to call out some information if there's, things that feel like they're double counting. So for example, if you fill out your census for your on-campus or, campus address, whether that's, campus housing or off-campus housing, and then your parents still include you in their census, it's okay. Because the second question here asks you, when you get to filling it out for each person, and it's not going to show it here because it's one of those, it only asks you if you say, once you go through it, but it'll say, does this person live somewhere else some of the time? And they'll, your parents would then click the checkbox that says, yes, they live at college. And so the Census Bureau then has a system that will kind of make sure that you're not double counted. And again, we want to err on the side of being over counted because we don't want folks who are not counted at all. So it'll ask you who's staying there. It asks you if it's an owned apartment or a rented apartment. Again, if you live in a rented apartment, you are still responsible for filling out your own census. It's not the responsibility of your landlord. So pay attention to that. They ask you for a phone number. So if for some reason you go through this, you go through the system and you put the information in and the Census Bureau has questions, they might call you. I'm going to tell you that the Census Bureau is very, very understaffed. And of course, with everything going on with COVID-19, they are also incredibly overworked right now. So the possibility that someone's going to call you is very small, but they ask for the number just in case. They ask you the person's sex. Unfortunately, there's only male and female. The census has not evolved enough to allow for folks who are transgender or who identify in other ways. That is unfortunate, and it's something that we are lobbying for to change in the next 10 years, but did not change for this one. They ask you for the birth date. Again, if you're filling this out and you're including your roommates and you don't know their birth date, you can leave that blank. Even if you just know the year, you can still fill that out just so that there's some information. They ask you questions about race. So this is surprising to me when I filled it out, but once you choose white or Black African American or what, one of these things that has the extra box on the bottom, they actually ask you to identify what that means. So if you identify as white, they'll ask you what your ethnicity is beyond that. So for me, I put Jewish because I'm very different. I'm lots of different things. I didn't know what else to put. So, again, the Census Bureau has ways that they're kind of fixing some of this information. I know, for example, the Illinois Muslim Coalition is asking folks because you'll notice there is no Arab American choice on there, which is really interesting to folks who identify as Middle Eastern, because they don't identify as white, but that's the closest that's on there for them. And so the Illinois Muslim Coalition is encouraging folks to put their country of origin. So again, fill it out to the best of your ability, to what feels natural to you. And if you don't feel like filling out that part, you can skip it. They may call you to ask you that, but again, I don't think that that's really something that's going to happen. So this is it. This is all they're asking you. And this is the information that will help determine funding for the next 10 years. All right, so the timeline. Obviously, things have been screwed up, but they started to send out the letters. So every household should have gotten a letter sometime in the week of March 12th. Those letters had the website that I just showed you, plus a code for your specific household. You would go online and you can fill out that code, and then it asks you all the questions that we just went through. If you do not have your letter, that is okay. What would happen then is that you'll see a little box on the bottom that says, I do not have my code. You click on that, and then you type your address in, and it finds you through the system. That's totally fine, and that's what we're encouraging a lot of folks to do, because since a lot of students have left the residence they live in, usually during the school year, they might not be getting their mail yet. They might not have that. So go ahead, use your campus address, whether that's on campus or off, and try and fill that out. Now, a side note about folks who live in university housing. So if you live in a residence hall, those are counted differently. Residence halls are counted in what's called group quarters. So your university is being asked to provide information about who lives in those residence halls. Most universities, the universities had a choice. They could just download everything they have from their systems and send it. That was called e-response. Or they could have asked the Census Bureau to drop off forms that people in the residence halls were going to fill out. Well, we know that that can't happen now, right? So most universities now have switched to the e-response. Even if they don't have all the information, right? So some universities don't keep race and ethnicity information, and they can't share it. Some universities don't have, they don't have a checkbox for male or female, which, who knows? Sometimes there's information that won't be able to be submitted, but at this point, because we cannot, most universities are not coming back to campus, and specifically not coming back to residence halls. Universities are taking care of just sort of downloading that information and sending what they have to the Census Bureau. So it might not be perfect, but at least it's a number of people. And so if you normally live in the residence hall, then you will probably get some information from your res hall directors, but you won't necessarily have to fill something out directly. And if you go online and try and put in the address for a residence hall, they might not let you fill it out anyway. So just know that if you normally live in a residence hall and you put that information into the census website, it might not let you fill anything out. So Census Day is April 1st. So as I said, that's kind of a random day they choose that they're just trying to get a snapshot. So you'll see a lot of social media, a big push from a lot of nonprofit organizations on April 1st to go ahead and fill it out. So as I said, everybody got a letter starting mid-March, and by the original timeline was that by April 9th, if people hadn't, particularly in college towns, if people hadn't filled out the census form yet, they were going to send out the census takers, right? So the people who come and knock on your door and ask you the questions so that they can fill it out with you. Because of everything going on with COVID-19, all of that has been pushed back. So most likely, the census takers are not going to show up in neighborhoods until earliest mid-May. And again, that misses a window for a lot of schools that graduate in the semester, time frame. So we're trying to get the word out really for folks who live off campus particularly to fill this out, because you're not going to be there for a census taker to come and get that information. And then so those folks are going to be heading out basically from May through, I think, early August now. So technically the census was supposed to end July 31st. They've pushed that back 2 weeks. The Census Bureau is required by law to get their information to the president by December 31st of 2020. They have not asked for an extension on that yet. It's still a possibility, but I think they're hopeful that they'll still be able to get some information, get the information they need and get it to the president on time. So here's some things I think are really helpful. One, the census is available in multiple languages. So you can go online and fill it out in 12 different languages, and you can call the 1-800 number there and fill it out in 59 different languages, or get a paper form sent to you in any of those languages. So, even if English is not your first language, if you feel more comfortable doing it in the language that, whatever your first language is, the Census Bureau has that available for you. If you don't feel comfortable filling it out online, which is totally fine, you can fill it out over the phone with somebody on the phone, or you can request that they send you a paper copy. It has not been clear to me whether or not they will send you a paper copy to a different address than the address you need to fill it out for. But it is still an option, and it's something you can call and ask about. This big graphic here is for a helpline that the Illinois Department of Human Services has set up. So you can text questions to 987-987. So you text question to 987-987 and they'll respond, and then you can ask your question and have a conversation if you have concerns or questions about the census at all. So I just think that's a useful tool if it's just something that you're sitting around and you're like, I don't understand this. Because unfortunately, there were lots of folks who were going to be ready to help you fill this out in person, but all of those places and spaces have been closed, right? So public libraries were going to be available. Many of them are closed. There were a lot of students and student organizations that were thinking about setting things up in like student unions. A lot of that is just not available. So here's an easy way with your text, with your phone to get some answers. And also, if you call the 1-800 number, they can walk you through things as well. And what can you do to kind of help get out the count, right? So, share why this is important with your friends and family. Make sure that they understand as well. A lot of folks live in non-traditional households and so might not understand their responsibility, right? So I might live with my grandmother during the school year because she lives closer to campus. Well, then I should be counted with my grandmother, and we need to talk about that, right? So really just try and have that conversation. Talk to folks about if they understand how to fill it out, and if they don't, share resources or send them to the different websites that are available. Organizing's a little bit harder at this point, but if you're part of online Facebook groups, if you're doing online classes, just remind people that the census is happening and they should fill it out. And then certainly if people have questions, sending them to good resources is always helpful. So I included the Illinois Count Me in 2020 website. And obviously I'll send these slides to Gabby and Allison, so if they want to share that, that's great. The other thing I was thinking might be helpful is that I can share with you guys, or at least show you the actual website. So let me do that for just a quick second. Sorry, there we go. All right, so as I said, this is the website. It's my2020census.gov. It's really easy. If you just say, start the questionnaire. Here, if you have your 12-digit census ID, you can put that in and it'll take you directly to the questionnaire. I do not have my census ID. So then you just click there and it asks you where you're living. And it asks you for your address. So I can just use mine for a second just to show folks. Let's just see if I put in all the information or if they can find it. See, and then it found me. And so it'll ask me for my apartment, my unit number, and then it would take me directly to the. I'm sorry, did someone have a question? All right. So yeah. So this is. I'm going to mute this person because I don't think they know that we can hear them. So this is the website. So this is all they're going to ask you. And as I said, this is every person. This isn't just folks who are citizens of the U.S. This isn't just homeowners who own a home. This is every single person who lives here, because we want to make sure that the resources that are allocated are resources that match the makeup of the community, right? So that we know that there's, 20,000 5-year-olds in Edwardsville, and those folks are going to need schooling for the next 10 years, right? Or that there's 15,000 80-year-olds, and those folks are going to need some more specific medical care as they grow older. So really having that snapshot is what's important. Anybody have any questions? Oh, Gabby, you're still muted.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Okay, Natalie, would you mind addressing that issue? I know, I want to say it was last week sometime, I saw a post across my Facebook feed talking about like fake census forms. Would you mind addressing that issue? How would we know which one is the legit form versus, something that wasn't out from a different organization, not quite the real thing?
Right. So that's a great question. Weirdly, COVID-19 has helped with that a little bit, because people who were creating these sort of fake census things have now moved on to creating fake COVID things. But basically, if you're going online to fill out the form, it should be at that my2020census.gov. It shouldn't be anywhere else. So always make sure that that's where you're starting. No one else should, like the unique code that you have should work in there. And if you don't have the code, that's fine. But certainly there's nowhere else that they should be asking you for information. And also, the census doesn't ask you about your social security number. It doesn't ask you about your income. It's not asking for any of that information. So if you see that those questions are part of something, certainly not. The census is not going to call you unless you give them a phone number. So if you fill out the census and they still have questions, they might call you for follow-up. But if you haven't filled it out yet and someone calls you to fill it out, then that's fake, because they're not doing calls as of yet. I should say it's possible that if COVID persists, they may move to that. But as of right now, that's not something that folks are doing. And there are no census takers out currently. As I said, those folks are probably not going to be in the field until May. And so if someone knocks on your door to fill out the census, then make sure you see that they have an actual badge, that they seem legit, because there shouldn't be anybody knocking on doors right now, particularly in Illinois, until at least April 7th. But even then, the Census Bureau has said they're not sending out census takers yet. So, I would say, if you have any questions, the 1-800 number I shared and the website, those are the places that you should be giving your information. No one else should really be asking for it yet.
And so you were mentioning the text number. to ask additional questions as well. Would it be fair then to say, so if I go online today and there's a question, I'm not sure how I should answer that, is that something I would be able to text them about?
Yes. Yeah, that's why they're set up, right? So like, if you have a question about, you know, this person lives here but doesn't really live here and I'm not sure, that's the kind of thing that they can help you with.
Do they have set hours? I can remember if you said, is this like a 24/7 thing? Or?
That is a great question. I don't remember. I think it is 24/7, but I will see if I can get an answer to that because I am not totally sure. So yeah, I can follow up with that and see.
Anyone else? Krishna, Blessing, any questions?
Yeah, everything is straightforward, so I don't have any questions.
Great.
So if we live in, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry. If we live in residence halls, do you still want us to go ahead and fill out the forms?
So if you lived in a residence hall on campus, then no. Then the campus is taking care of it for you. You should, if they need you to fill anything out, you should get communications directly from campus about that. But most campuses right now have opted to just, they can, you know, because you live on campus, they have a significant amount of information about you. They're just downloading that and sharing it with the Census Bureau, as opposed to having you fill out something separately.
Okay.
So
I think, yeah, those are the questions I have. And Blessing, I can also reach out to people in housing. I'm sure that's somewhere in a list of things either to do or that they're ongoing right now. I know there's other like more present things they're trying to plan, but I'll be happy to kind of send that question their way. And they can then tell us, and we'll share that with all the students. Specifically, if you live on campus, I'll try to, you know, send something out as soon as I hear from them.
yeah,
Okay.
the Census Bureau also just released just a 2-minute video that I have found really helpful for college students. So I'll forward that on to you guys as well, because I think it's a good explanation of what's happening with the census in this COVID-19 2020 time. So I'll forward that as well.
Excellent.
So, great. And I will make sure to forward the recording of this too, so that you guys can use it.
Okay, thank you. We're fostering a dog in these times of self-isolation, or actually social distancing, right? Because we're not sick,
Right.
so we cannot say isolation. But we're practicing social distancing. My son has been lobbying very strongly to foster a dog, so you can take care of a dog and then eventually adopt it if it's a good fit and whatnot. But also because there's always like an overpopulation of pets. Anyway, so he just let me know they have the pet, so I should I should head up there when our presentation is.
Lovely,
Anyway.
very fun. All right, well, thank you guys so much. If anybody has any more questions, I'll also make sure that Gabby has my info. Happy to help however I can. Great.
Thank you for joining, guys. And thank you, Allison, for helping us set this up with Natalie. Of course, we appreciate that. And we know at some point our students are either going to be approached about this or get a form. And so, we definitely see the value of informing as much as we can about this. So
Great.
thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Natalie.
Bye.
Bye.